We're continuing a series of sermons, and it's entitled Shalom, which is about peace. And again, like Torch taught us in the beginning of this series, when the church talks about shalom, when it talks about peace, it's not talking about simply the end of violence. It's not talking about the end of conflict. It's talking about a sense of peace that's not at all dependent on circumstances. When Jesus speaks of peace, he speaks of, of this calmness, this stillness, this silence that only the Father can give. And again, it's something that when it ministers to your soul, when it arrives there, when Paul received it, he could not find the language to describe it. So he referred to it as the peace that passes all understanding. And Jesus said, I'm the Prince of Peace. And when he appeared to the apostles in the upper room, one of the things he said was, my peace I leave with you. He obviously wants us to have that peace. And I want to talk about having that peace, even around other people. Even around people we don't necessarily agree with all the time. Does that ever happen to anybody? Of course, it never happened to me. It probably wouldn't happen to you either, but you might know somebody who could use this message. Right? I want to talk about peace with others. In the name of introducing it, my best friend for the majority of my life, that friend that I just would not ever want to get rid of, was Brad White. I did Brad's daughter's wedding a couple years ago up in Gainesville. But we go back that far. In junior high school, we played basketball with each other. And we even hustled a few games. Everyone underestimated us because we were just so skinny and unathletic looking that when a milkshake at Crescent's drugstore got put on the line, we were never the paying party. We were a comedy routine, everything. If I had all day, I'd tell you about it. And still in touch. He's a banker in Tallahassee now. A Gator fan living in Tallahassee. Don't know how he's doing it. But if anyone can do it, it's my friend Brad White. Brad was also competitive, and we ran with a larger group of friends, a circle of friends. And when we were in 9th, 10th grade, we would spend our Saturdays during the fall playing sandlot football. Playing amongst friends. And guys, you know what that means, don't you? Because, the rivalry breaks out. These are your friends, and you love them, and you want them to do well, but you don't want them to outdo you. And I know they have instant replays, even in the college games now. I wish we had them back then. Because in my circle of friends, just like in your circle of friends, on your sandlot fields, you would have disagreements on what a forward pass was. Was it out of bounds? Was it a completion? Was it a penalty? And those disagreements usually got loud and sometimes involved choice language and sometimes involved a few shoves and maybe even a few slugs here and there. And my friend Brad White was always in the middle of those controversies. Always in the middle of them. And here we would be yelling, shouting, stating our case, and Brad always silenced that. He'd say, hey, listen, I wouldn't argue with you if I didn't know that I was right. That worked 3 or 4 times. And then finally, one of us got the nerve to counter that by saying, wait a minute. I wouldn't argue back if I didn't know that I was right. And maybe you've met people who walk around with that approach, that mindset, that attitude that says, I am right. And I wouldn't argue with you if I didn't know that I was right. And those kind of people are hard to get along with, don't you think? And one of the reasons we have a hard time getting along with them is because we've got the same thing going. We can handle that by trying to live the life of a hermit and just plain avoid people that hold on to that attitude. That's just it. We would have to avoid everybody if we did that. So, what do we do? I think it helps to go to the teaching of God's Word. And I'm reading today at least this first set of verses from what's called the Amplified version of the Bible. And when sometimes people tell me it's got to be this version, it's got to be that version, it's got to be, oh boy, it drives me crazy. I think we ought to read it from Greek, don't you? Problem. I have a hard time in Greek. So I go to whenever I'm trying to find out a true meaning, I go to what's called the Amplified version, which is going to go over and beyond using as many words as necessary to convey what the original Greek says. Not just one word, not just a hope to hit the best word, but as many words necessary to convey the point. And Jesus met people who couldn't get along, who argued a lot and would not give up arguing because they knew they were right. And sometimes let the conflicts of those arguments get so high and mighty, so hot and bothered, that it actually broke relationships. And to such people, even in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said these words. And since it's voluminous, let me read this for you. Jesus said, "But I say to you, everyone who continues to be angry with his brother, or harbors malice, or harbors enmity of heart toward his brother, against him shall be liable to and unable to escape the punishment imposed by the court." Wow. That's some pretty heavy stuff. Anyone who continues with anger, anyone who continues with malice, anyone who continues with enmity, it is a place where they're liable to hell or to the punishment of the court or unable to escape that punishment. Think about those things when our lack of peace gets to the point that we become at odds, we become enemies with one another. And when we continue in it. Now, let's take it apart. We all know what it's like to get angry with someone. I mean, I doubt any of us can go to Walmart and back without getting angry at somebody. But have you met that person, though, who really should have gotten over their conflict, their anger, their moment, should have gotten over it in a matter of seconds, but they remember it minutes later, hours later, days later, weeks later, months later, years later, decades later? They're obviously focused on whatever it was that was done wrong. They're obviously focused, even obsessed with whatever it was that set them off. And that's what they become centered on it. And malice comes to be. I see the word M-A-L in malice, and that's Latin for bad. They want bad on someone who has supposedly offended them. They harbor enmity in their hearts. And I see the word enemy in the word enmity. Wow. That's all toxic stuff. There's people who walk around with that toxicity in their souls. Jesus' presence is supposed to be in our souls, not this toxicity. So we're walking around harboring some really nasty stuff when that's our way. And Jesus offers such a better alternative. Why would we insist on the poison toxicity when we can have the shalom peace of Jesus Christ instead? And Jesus went on to say, "And whoever speaks contemptuously and insultingly to his brother shall be liable to and unable to escape the punishment imposed by the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, 'You cursed fool,' shall be liable to, and unable to escape the hell of fire. That means even when our angst stays inside and finally erupts outside, we become displaying the thoughts of the heart. Look what happens. And again, it speaks of a toxicity living in the heart that is bad for the heart. And Jesus offers peace instead. So look what he said. He said, so if when you are offering your gift at the altar, you there remember that your brother has any grievance against you. Talking about approaching the altar. You come up here to present your offering, present your sacrifice, present your gift that is supposed to present you pardon. And if once there, oh man, I've got some unfinished business. I've got some malice. I've got some enmity in my heart. Jesus says, man, you've got an important homework assignment and you've got to take care of it right away. You come to this altar, or the altar offering gets brought to you later on in the worship service, and there you remember that your brother or your sister or your mother or your father or your son or your daughter or your co-workers or your friends or the people you play bridge with or the people you go fishing with or the people you play golf with or the people you hang out with or the people on the homeowners association board, whoever they might be. If you remember that they have some kind of grievance against you, you have something that you must do. Leave your gift. First, leave your gift at the altar and go. So one time pastors understand folks getting up and walking out during a worship service. That's what we think is going on. Okay? First, make what with your brother? Peace. That's shalom with your brother. And then come back. Once you settle accounts out there, once you've made peace, man, then you stand to really receive a blessing here at the altar. Do you see that? Do you see how important that is? We can hang on to anger, and my gosh, I know about anger. I know how energized that can make you feel. I mean, when you get angry, when you get mad, you can do superhuman things. But it's a very polluted, burning fuel. Does not burn well. There's a better motivation, and that's the peace of Jesus Christ. As we have choices on what we're going to hold on to, we're going to have choices as to what lives within us. And Jesus said, man, you better have the right priorities. Most people spend time maintaining their grievances against people than they do working on the peace of Jesus Christ. Gosh, it needs to be just the opposite. Jesus had such a better way. Here's some teachings that his word gives to us. Read with me. For to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. Do you hear that? We can set our minds on this earthly life. We can set it on flesh. We can set it on things that produces conflict and all the injustice that goes along with it. But to set our mind on those things leads to what? Death. What fun is that? What good is that? What miserable living would it be that would lead to death? But we can set our minds on something else. We can set it on the Spirit, on its plenitude, on its grace, on its power, its love, all of its benefits. And that's when life becomes interesting and fulfilling. And then it creates what? It creates life, not death. It creates a plenitude of life. And it creates shalom. We have a choice. We, honest to goodness, have a choice. Paul wrote the same letter to the Colossians. Read with me. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body, and be thankful. Do you hear that? That's not like the peace of shalom of Christ ruling in our hearts. Not just being some contributing influence, not just being some present factor there, not just being some kind of a nerd sort of something just lying there waiting to be opened up. Paul said, let it rule in your hearts. And I want to give key emphasis to the words let. I mean, we have a choice. We can allow the peace to rule our hearts, or we can let the negative stuff rule our hearts. We have an honest to goodness choice. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. And to which indeed you were called in one body. You hear that? That's to say that we were in the body of Christ, the church. And if we can't have it here amongst ourselves, it's going to be a wreck out there. I'm talking about the wreck out there. My heart goes out today to the people of Nepal. Would that the Prince of Peace appear to them. And I know Christians are over there bringing relief work as we speak. God bless them. God empower them. My heart goes out to the people of Baltimore. You know what? There's more wonderful people in that community that